I'm wearing the same thing every time. Oh, yeah. I was going to mention those. I have my licensed Harry Potter wand right here. This is Hermione's wand. I have my little friend Harry here. I will be taking guests. Whenever we begin discussion, if you want to hop in the voice chat and we can discuss, because I have some questions for y'all. Here it is. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. A little bit of annotations. But this is the edition that I'm going to be reading. This is the illustrated edition. Yeah. Very pretty. I mean, just look at this art. This is how it was meant to be read right here. Oh, not much art there, but yes. So let's see. I'll try to show the pictures. How am I going to do this? This worked a lot better in my head. Let's see. This thing is big. It's so enticing. Let's see, can you even see that? Can y'all even see that? No. Whatever. I'll just have to show the pictures individually. Petunia looking rough. She's no Lily Potter. She is no Lily Potter, that's for sure. And guess when you'll wait for shredded. The only other person that ever joins. Let's see, can I get Harry in on this? Whatever, Harry's right here. Everybody just pretend that you can see Harry. Expelliarmus. Oh my god, it's chipped. Look at that, it's chipped. My magical wand is chipped. get some more people in here. I guess I'll discuss my history with Harry Potter. Harry Potter was the first big boy books that I ever read. But Harry Potter is, of course, at least the first couple of ones are children's books. Now I remember being like, my mom really loved Harry Potter. Like she would always go to. I'm old enough to remember when they were still like being released and coming out, and she'd go to like the midnight releases for some of them. Like she loved Harry Potter, so naturally I started reading them. And holy fuck, what I was like, oh my god, because it was like the first like universe that I ever like fell into. I must have been 9 or 10. I was in 4th grade reading Harry Potter. I remember my teacher yelling at me because I would just not stop reading Harry Potter. Like I was the biggest Harry Potter fanboy ever. She'd make me move my star because I could not stop reading. Could not stop reading Harry Potter. It was like crack cocaine. And I remember exactly where I was when I finished it. I was waiting for my mom to get out of this hair salon. And I finished the Deathly Hollows. Yeah, that's the name. Yeah, it left a big impact on me. And then like years passed. Like I was like 15 or 16. Whenever I was like, you know what? Like I remember loving Harry Potter, but like I didn't really remember like really that much about it because I was really young. But then I reread like the entire thing, and I was like, oh my god, like this is still like top tier. Like this is still like the best thing I've ever read. And yeah, ever since then, now my love for Harry Potter has subsided a bit just because like I'm not reading them all the time. There was a point in time where I would read one like once a year. Yeah, that's why I was confused. The Deathly Hollows is 2 movies. No, don't get me started on the fucking movie adaptations. The first 3 movies are fantastic. I mean, I really love them. They're really faithful to the books. They're feel-good movies, especially the 3rd one because they got like this artsy-fartsy, like Spanish director auteur to make it, and like the score was just amazing, and it's just like a all-around like fantastic movie. I mean, it really makes you feel like you're in like a different world. And yeah, but after that, after 3, Prisoner of Azkaban, it just went all downhill with the worst one ever, which was the Goblet of Fire, which is just like a joke to actual Harry Potter fans. What I mean, actual Harry Potter fans, I mean, read the fucking books. You're not a Harry Potter fan if you see the movies. You can say I'm a fan of the movies, but you're not a Harry Potter fan because those are pale imitations. Okay. And then okay, let's see. What was after the Goblet of Fire? It was the Order of the Phoenix. Now, Order of the Phoenix is like a decent movie, but Daniel Radcliffe's acting is just so terrible. I feel like he looks the part, but he's just not like his acting ability is just not there really to hold Harry. And also, I have a lot of gripes with Order of the Phoenix. Harry Potter fans, usually it's like undeniable fact that Order of the Phoenix is like the least strongest one. Did he really? Daniel Radcliffe had alcohol problems filming Harry Potter when he was like 10 years old. That's weird. But anyway, the Half-Blood Prince is really good. Really, okay. It's like the best one out of like the first 3, because the first 3 were like really consistent. Like they had the first 2 were like made by the same guy, and then the 3rd one, like I said, was like just like lightning in a bottle, pretty much. And then like the Half-Blood Prince. I like the Half-Blood Prince. It's like the best one besides the originals. Because like those first 3 are just on like a completely different like level, in my opinion. And Deathly Hollows was split into 2 movies for money purposes. Yeah, Half-Blood Prince is really good. But yeah, they just wanted more money, so like they just like split it up. No, well, in their defense, the Deathly Hollows is like the biggest book, and there's like a lot of shit that needs to be addressed. Like the Battle of Hogwarts, which is like the last chapter. Not it's not the last chapter, but it's one of like the last chapters. It's my favorite chapter ever written by anybody. The Battle of Hogwarts. That is of course at the very end where they have the Battle of Hogwarts. Voldemort's legions or whatever invade. Oh god, so much emotion when I think about that. But yeah, no, this is kind of controversial, but everybody loves the Deathly Hallows. Like Deathly Hallows, it's the best one. Blah 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 blah. It's the most darkest. It's the most blah 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 morose. Whatever. Okay, well, that's not really. It's not really my favorite. Not even really close. I'll tell you why. Because there's no. It completely the formula that they had all the way that J.K. Rowling had all the way up from 1 through 6 is not present any longer in the Deathly Hallows because there is the call to adventure, aka like being at the Dursleys and being like, "Fuck, I hate the Dursleys." Like, and the Dursleys are just like, "I fucking hate the Dursleys." We're gonna talk a lot about the Dursleys when we get to the discussion, but I'm like, I'm here for like, I want to see Harry like leave and go to Hogwarts and like go to school. Like that's what Harry Potter is. It's like the joke is that like it's like, oh, it's just like me. Like Harry Potter is going to school just like I'm going to school. Obviously, whenever I'm like younger, you can relate a lot more with Harry Potter. But anyways, it's like, oh yeah, well Harry Potter's got to go to school too, and it's like, oh yeah, well instead of like learning math, he's learning like magic. Like that's the whole gimmick of the thing. And so whenever Deathly Hallows comes around, and it's like, okay, well Harry doesn't go back to Hogwarts until the very end. So like the entire year of Hogwarts, like you can chart out like pretty much like every semester of Harry's tenure at Hogwarts up until Deathly Hallows because he didn't go that year. So I'm like, it makes sense narratively because she's got a wrap. It's like, okay, well, I built up all this shit and like Harry can't just go to school like nothing's happening when Voldemort is like actively destroying the world and like apparently taking out like world governments and all that shit. Yes, I'm still expecting my Hogwarts letter. If only. I make a good wizard. I look gay enough to fit the bill. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of my history with Harry Potter. I tried to get my sister to read Harry Potter, and she got pretty far. Like she was loving it, but like she just doesn't really stick with anything, so she couldn't finish it. I've read them all at least 4 times. I've read The Goblet of Fire more times than I can count. That's my favorite one. For many reasons. But I don't know if I want to like talk about the other books to spoil them. Because who knows if we're gonna ever read them. Probably not, but we'll see. Now the first chapter of this book is 18 pages. 18 pages. So yeah, that's pretty decent length. So maybe we'll do chapter 1 today. Yeah, it's like reading Harry Potter's like you never forget like the first time that you read them. I mean, J.K. Rowling is like the modern day Lewis Carroll, like Alice in Wonderland author. Like she is like genius. I love that woman so much, and she's getting canceled right now. It's very unfortunate. Very unfortunate because I remember like back in school, they'd be like, you have to write about like one of your idols or whatever. I would choose J.K. Rowling. Like I fucking love Harry Potter, and hopefully, my love. It doesn't need to be rekindled. It's always there, but I just haven't like read Harry Potter, seen anything Harry Potter related for like a couple of years, to be honest with you. But I remember some of my most fiercest like franchise debates, like being over Harry Potter. Like I would like kill people over that shit. I would really like want to kill them because they'd be like saying like some shit, and like I'm just like I take it so personally because like I've just assimilated it into my being, and yeah, I take Harry Potter pretty seriously. I love me some Harry Potter. Harry loves me. Harry's gonna watch me read. And I think I'll just begin. We've been discussing for about 20 minutes. So I think we'll get just right down to it and begin the journey. I'm so excited. Also, Fantastic Beast movies suck. They're terrible. They're god awful. Me and my sister went to go see it, the first one, and we are both like, that movie was like actually like generally like a bad movie. Like objectively like a bad film. Like it was terrible. We have the picture. The family of the Dursleys. They look like monsters, bro. Okay. Let us begin. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Lived. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they are perfectly normal, thank you very much. They were the last people you expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious, because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. The writing is so good, but we'll discuss. Mr. Dursley was the director of a firm called Grunnings, which made drills. He was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck, although he did have a very large mustache. Mrs. Dursley was thin and blonde and had nearly twice the usual amount of neck, which came in very useful as she spent so much of her time craning over garden fences, spying on the neighbors. The Dursleys had a small son called Dudley, and in their opinion, there is no finer boy anywhere. The Dursleys had everything they wanted, but they also had a secret, and that was their greatest fear, that somebody would discover it. They didn't think that they could ever bear if anyone found out about the Potters. Mrs. Potter was Mrs. Dursley's sister, but they hadn't met for several years, in fact. Mr. Dursley pretended she didn't have a sister, because her sister and her good-for-nothing husband were as un-Dursley-ish as was possible to be. The Dursleys shuddered to think what the neighbors would say if the Potters arrived on the street. The Dursleys knew that the Potters had a small son, too, but they had never seen him. This boy was another good reason for keeping the Potters away. They didn't want Dudley mixing with a child like that. When Mr. and Mrs. Dursley woke up on the dole, Gray Tuesday, our story starts. There is nothing about the cloudy sky outside to suggest that strange and mysterious things would soon be happening all over the country. Mr. Dursley hummed as he picked out his most boring tie for work, and Mrs. Dursley gossiped away happily as she wrestled a screaming Dudley into his high chair. None of them noticed a large tawny owl flutter past the window. I want to write down something. All right, pardon me. At 8:30, Mr. Dursley picked up his briefcase, pecked Mrs. Dursley on the cheek, and tried to kiss Dudley goodbye, but missed, because Dudley was now having a tantrum and throwing his cereal at the wall. Little tyke, chortled Mr. Dursley as he left the house. He got into his car and backed out of number 4's drive. It was on the corner of the street that he noticed the first sign of something peculiar. A cat reading a map. And there's the cat reading the map. For a second, Mr. Dursley didn't realize what he had seen. Then he jerked his head around to look again. There was a tabby cat standing on the corner of Privet Drive, but there wasn't a map in sight. What could he have been thinking of? It must have been a trick of the light. Mr. Dursley blinked and stared at the cat. It stared back. As Mr. Dursley drove around the corner and up the road, he watched the cat in his mirror. It was now reading the sign that said Privet Drive. No, looking at the sign. Cats couldn't read maps or signs. Mr. Dursley gave himself a little shake and put the cat out of his mind. As he drove towards town, he thought of nothing except the large order of drills he was hoping to get that day. But on the edge of town, drills were driven out of his mind by something else. As he sat in the usual morning traffic jam, he couldn't help noticing that there seemed to be a lot of people strangely dressed about. People in cloaks. Mr. Dursley couldn't bear people who dressed in funny clothes. The get-ups he saw in young people. He supposed this was some stupid new fashion. He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel and his eyes fell on a huddle of those weirdos staying quite close by. They were whispering excitedly to one another. Mr. Dursley was enraged to see that a couple of them weren't young at all. Why, that man had to be older than he was, and he was wearing an emerald green cloak. The nerve of him. But then it struck Mr. Dursley that this was probably some silly stunt. These people were obviously collecting for something. Yes, that would be it. The traffic moved on, and a few minutes later, Mr. Dursley arrived in the Grunnings car park, and he put his mind back on the drills. Mr. Dursley always sat with his back to the window in his office on the 9th floor. If he hadn't, he might have found it harder to concentrate on drills that morning. He didn't see the owls sweeping past in broad daylight, though people down the street did. They pointed and gazed open-mouthed as owl after owl sped overhead. Most of them had never seen an owl even at nighttime. Mr. Dursley, however, had a perfectly normal owl-free morning. He yelled at 5 different people. He made several important telephone calls and shouted a bit more. He was in a very good mood until lunchtime, when he thought he'd stretch his legs and walk across the road to buy himself a bun from the baker's opposite. He'd forgotten all about the people in cloaks until he passed a group of them next to the baker's. He eyed them angrily as he passed. He didn't know why, but they made him uneasy. This lot were whispering excitedly too, and he couldn't see a single collecting tin. It was on his way back past them, clutching a large donut in his bag, that he caught a few words about what they were saying. The Potters, that's right, that's what I heard. Yes, their son, Harry. Mr. Dursley stopped dead. Fear flooded him. He looked back at the whisperers as if he wanted to say something to them, but thought better of it. He dashed back across the road, hurried up to his office, snapped at his secretary not to disturb him, seized his telephone, and had almost finished dialing his home number when he changed his mind. He put the receiver back down and stroked his mustache, thinking, no, he wasn't being stupid. Potter wasn't such an unusual name. He was sure that lots of people called Potter with a son named Harry. Come to think of it, he wasn't even sure his nephew was called Harry. He's such an asshole. He'd never even seen the boy. It might have even been Harvey or Harold. There's no point in worrying Miss Dursley. She would always get so upset at any mention of her sister. He didn't blame her if he'd had a sister like that. But all the same, those people in the cloaks. He found it a lot harder to concentrate on drills that afternoon, and when he left the building at 5 o'clock, he was still so worried that he walked straight into someone just outside the door. Sorry, he grunted, as a tiny old man stumbled and almost fell. It was a few seconds before Mr. Dursley realized that the man was wearing a violet cloak. He didn't seem at all upset at being almost knocked to the ground. On the contrary, his face split into a wide smile, and he said in a squeaky voice that made passersby stare, Don't be sorry, my dear sir, for nothing could upset me today. Rejoice, for you know who has gone at last. Even muggles like yourself should be celebrating. This is a happy, happy day. And the old man hugged Mr. Dursley around the middle and walked off. Mr. Dursley stood rooted to the spot. He had been hugged by a complete stranger. He also thought he had been called a muggle, whatever that was. He was rattled. He hurried to his car and set off home, hoping he was imagining things, which he had never hoped before, because he didn't approve of imagination. I have to write down some more. As he pulled into the driveway of number 4, the first thing he saw, and it didn't improve his mood, was the tabby cat he saw that morning. It was now sitting on his garden wall. He was sure it was the same one. It had the same markings around the eyes. "Shoo!" said Mr. Dursley loudly. The cat didn't move. It just gave him a stern look. Was this normal cat behavior, Mr. Dursley wondered? Trying to pull himself together, he let himself into the house. He was still determined not to mention anything to his wife. Mrs. Dursley had a nice, normal day. She told him over dinner all about Mrs. Next Door's problems with her daughter and how Dudley had learnt a new word, chant. Mr. Dursley tried to act normally. When Dudley had been put to bed, he went into the living room in time to catch the last report on the evening news. And finally, birdwatchers everywhere have reported that the nation's owls have been behaving very unusual today. Although owls normally hunt at night and are hardly ever seen in daylight, there have been hundreds of signs of these birds flying in every direction since sunrise. Experts are unable to explain why the owls have suddenly changed their sleeping pattern. The newsreader allowed himself a grin. Most mysterious. And now, over to Jim McGuffin with the weather. Going to be any more showers of owls tonight, Jim? Well, Ted, said the weatherman, I don't know about that. But it's not only the owls that have been acting oddly lately. Viewers as far apart as Kent, Yorkshire, and Dundee have been phoning in to tell me that instead of the rain I promised yesterday, they've had a downpour of shooting stars. Perhaps people have been celebrating bonfire night early. It's not until next week, folks. But I can promise a wet night tonight. One of the pretty owls. Mr. Dursley sat frozen in his armchair. Shooting stars all over Britain, owls flying by daylight, mysterious people in cloaks all over the place, and a whisper about the Potters. Mrs. Dursley came into the living room carrying 2 cups of tea. It was no good. He had to say something to her. He cleared his throat nervously. Petunia, dear, you haven't heard from your sister lately, have you? As he had expected, Mrs. Dursley looked shocked and angry. After all, they normally pretend she didn't have a sister. No, she said sharply. Why? Funny stuff on the news, Mr. Dursley mumbled. Owls, shooting stars, and there were a lot of funny-looking people in town today. So? Snapped Mrs. Dursley. Well, I just thought maybe you had something to do with, her lot. Mrs. Dursley sipped her tea through pursed lips. Mr. Dursley wondered whether he dared tell her he heard the name Potter. He decided he didn't dare. Instead, he said, as casually as he could, Their son. He'd be about Dudley's age now, wouldn't he? I suppose so, said Mrs. Dursley stiffly. What's his name again? Howard, isn't it? Harry. Nasty common name, if you ask me. Oh, yes, said Mr. Dursley, his heart sinking horribly. Yes, I quite agree. He didn't say another word on the subject as they went upstairs to bed. While Mrs. Dursley was in the bathroom, Mr. Dursley crept into the bedroom window and peered down into the front garden. The cat was still there. It was staring down Privet Drive as though it was waiting for something. Was he imagining things? Could all this have something to do with the Potters? If it did, if it got out that they were related to a pair of, well, he didn't even think he could bear it. The Dursleys got into bed. Mrs. Dursley fell asleep quickly, but Mr. Dursley lay awake, turning it all over in his mind. His last comforting thought before he fell asleep was that even if the Potters were involved, there was no reason for them to come near him and Mrs. Dursley. The Potters knew very well what he and Petunia thought about them and their kind. He couldn't see how he and Petunia could get mixed up in anything that might be going on. He yawned and turned over. It couldn't affect them. How very wrong he was. Mr. Dursley might have been drifting into an uneasy sleep, but the cat on the wall outside was showing no sign of sleepiness. It was staying as still as a statue, its eyes fixed unblinkingly on the far corner of Privet Drive. It didn't so much as quiver when a car door slammed in the next street, nor when 2 owls swooped overhead. In fact, it was nearly midnight before the cat moved at all. A man appeared on the corner of the street. A man appeared on the corner the cat had been watching. Appeared so suddenly and silently, you'd have thought he just popped out of the ground. The cat's tail twitched and its eyes narrowed. Nothing like this man had ever been seen on Privet Drive. He was tall, thin, and very old. Judging by the silver of his beard and of his hair and beard, which were both long enough to tuck inside his belt. He was wearing long robes, a purple cloak which swept the ground, and high-heeled buckled boots. His blue eyes were light, bright, and sparkling behind half-moon spectacles, and his nose was very long and crooked, as though it had been broken at least twice. This man's name was Albus Dumbledore. Albus Dumbledore didn't seem to realize that he had just arrived in a street where everything from his name to his boots was unwelcome. He was busy rummaging in his cloak, looking for something. But he did seem to realize he was being watched, because he looked up suddenly at the cat, which was still staring at him from the other end of the street. For some reason, the sight of the cat seemed to amuse him. He chuckled and muttered, "I should have known." He had found what he was looking for in his inside pocket. It seemed to be a silver cigarette lighter. He flicked it open, held it up in the air, and clicked it. The nearest street lamp went out with a little pop. He clicked it again. The next lamp flickered into darkness. 12 times he clicked the put outer, until the only lights left in the whole street were two tiny pinpricks in the distance, which were the eyes of the cat watching them. If anyone looked out of their window now, even beady-eyed Mrs. Dursley, they wouldn't be able to see anything that was happening down the pavement. Dumbledore slipped the put outer back into his cloak and set off down the street towards number 4, where he sat down on the wall next to the cat. He didn't look at it, but after a moment, he spoke to it. "Fancy seeing you here, Professor McGonagall." He turned to smile at the tabby, but it had gone. Instead, he was smiling at a rather severe-looking woman who was wearing square glasses exactly the shape of the markings the cat had around its eyes. She, too, was wearing a cloak, an emerald one. Her black hair was drawn to a tight bun. She looked distinctly ruffled. "How did you know it was me?" she asked. "My dear Professor, I've never seen a cat sit so stiffly." "You'd be stiff if you'd been sitting here on a brick wall all day," said Professor McGonagall. "All day? When you could have been celebrating? I must have passed a dozen feasts and parties on my way here." Professor McGonagall sniffed angrily. "Oh yes, everyone's celebrating all right," she said impatiently. "You'd think they'd be a bit more careful, but no. Even the muggles have noticed something's going on. It was on their news." She jerked her head back to the Dursleys' dark living room. "I heard it. Flocks of owls, shooting stars, well, they're not completely stupid. They were bound to notice something. Shooting stars down in Kent. I'll bet that was Della's Diggle. He never had much sense." You can't blame them," said Dumbledore gently. "We've had precious little to celebrate for 11 years. "I know that," said Professor McGonagall irritably. "But there's no reason to lose our heads. People are being downright careless, out on the streets in broad daylight, not even dressed in muggle clothes, swapping rumors." She threw a sharp, sideways glance at Dumbledore here, as though hoping he was going to tell her something, but he didn't. So she went on. "A fine thing it would be if, on the day you-know-who seems to have disappeared at last, the muggles found out about us. A fine thing it would be if, on the very day you-know-who seems to have disappeared at last, the muggles found out about us all. I suppose he really has gone, Dumbledore?" "It certainly seems so," said Dumbledore. "We have much to be thankful for. Would you care for a sherbet lemon?" "A what?" "A sherbet lemon. They're a kind of muggle sweet I'm rather fond of." "No, thank you," said Professor McGonagall coolly, as though she didn't think this was the moment for a sherbet lemon. "As I say, even you-know-who has gone. My dear Professor, surely a sensible person like yourself can call him by his name. All this you-know-who nonsense. For 11 years I've been trying to persuade people to call him by his proper name, Voldemort." Professor McGonagall flinched, but Dumbledore, who was unsticking 2 sherbet lemons, seemed not to notice. "It all gets so confusing if you keep saying you-know-who. I have never seen any reason to be frightened of saying Voldemort's name." "I know you haven't," said Professor McGonagall, seeming half exasperated, half admiring. "But you're different. Everyone knows you're the only one all right, Voldemort, was frightened of." "You flatter me," said Dumbledore calmly. "Voldemort has powers I will never have. Only because you're too, well, noble to use them. It's lucky it's dark. I haven't blushed so much since Madame Pomfrey told me she liked my new earmuffs." Professor McGonagall shot a sharp look at Dumbledore and said, "The owls are nothing to the rumors that are flying around. You know what everyone's saying? About why he's disappeared? About what finally stopped him?" It seemed that Professor McGonagall had reached the point where she was most anxious to discuss the real reason she had been waiting on a cold, hard wall all day, but neither as a cat nor as a woman had she fixed Dumbledore with such a piercing stare as she did now. It was plain that whatever everyone was saying, she was not going to believe it until Dumbledore told her it was true. Dumbledore, however, was choosing another sherbet lemon and did not answer. What they're saying, she pressed on, is that last night Voldemort turned up in Godric's Hollow. He went to find the Potters. The rumor is that Lily and James Potter are that they're dead. Dumbledore bowed his head. Professor McGonagall gasped. Lily and James. I can't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. Oh, Albus. Dumbledore reached out and patted her on the shoulder. I know, he said heavily. Professor McGonagall's voice trembled, and she went on. That's not all. They're saying he tried to kill the Potter's son, Harry, but he couldn't. He couldn't kill that little boy. No one knows why or how, but they're saying that when he couldn't kill a Harry Potter, Voldemort's power somehow broke, and that's why he's gone. Dumbledore nodded glumly. It's true? Faltered Professor McGonagall. After all he's done, all the people he's killed, he couldn't kill a little boy? It's just so astounding of all the things to stop him. But how in the name of heaven did Harry survive? We can only guess, said Dumbledore. We may never know. As for he knows. And we figure out that he knows like 5 books later. Mary tells Harry the prophecy. That's crazy. This is why rereading is worth it. Professor McGonagall pulled out a lace handkerchief and dabbed at her eyes beneath her spectacles. Dumbledore gave a great sniff as he took a golden watch from his pocket and examined it. It was a very odd watch. It had 12 hands but no numbers, and instead little planets were moving around the edge. It must have made sense to Dumbledore, though, because he put it back in his pocket and said, Hagrid's late. I suppose it was he who told you I'd be here. Yes, said Professor McGonagall, and I don't suppose you're going to tell me why you're here, of all places. I've come to bring Harry to his aunt and uncle. They're the only family he has left now. You can't mean the people living here, cried Professor McGonagall, jumping to her feet and pointing at number 4. Dumbledore, you can't. I've been watching them all day. You can't find 2 people who are less like us. And they've got this son. I saw him kicking his mother all the way up the street, screaming for sweets. Harry Potter, come and live here. It's the best place for him, said Dumbledore firmly. His aunt and uncle will be able to explain everything to him when he's older. I've written them a letter. A letter, repeated Professor McGonagall faintly, sitting back down on the wall. Really, Dumbledore? You think you can explain this all in a letter? These people will never understand him. He'll be famous, a legend. I won't be surprised if today was known as Harry Potter Day in the future. There will be books written about Harry. Every child in our world will know his name. Exactly, said Dumbledore, looking very seriously over the top of his half-moon spectacles. It will be enough to turn any boy's head. He's famous before he can walk and talk. Famous for something he didn't even remember. Can't you see how much better off he'll be growing up away from all that until he's ready to take it? Professor McGonagall opened her mouth, changed her mind, swallowed, and then said, Yes, you're right, of course. But how is the boy getting here, Dumbledore? She eyed his cloak sullenly as though she thought he might be hiding Harry underneath it. Hagrid's bringing him. Do you think it wise to trust Hagrid with something as important as this? I would trust Hagrid with my life, said Dumbledore. I'm not saying his heart is in the right place, said Professor McGonagall. But you can't pretend he's not careless. He does tend to... What was that? A low rumbling sound had broken the silence around them. It grew steadily louder as they looked up and down the street for some sign of a headlight. It swelled to a roar as they both looked up at the sky, and a huge motorbike fell out of the air and landed on the road in front of them. If the motorbike was huge, it was nothing to the man standing astride it. He was almost twice as tall as a normal man and at least 5 times as wide. He looked simply too big to be allowed, and so wild. Long tangles of bushy black hair and a beard hid most of his face. He had hands the size of dustbin lids, and his feet in their leather boots were like baby dolphins. In his vast, muscular arms, he was holding a bundle of blankets. Hagrid, said Dumbledore, sighing relieved. At last. And where did you get that motorbike? Borrowed it, Professor Dumbledore, sir, said the giant, climbing carefully off the motorbike as he spoke. Young Sirius Black lent it to me. I've got him, sir. See, like, Rowling had everything figured out. We never hear about Sirius Black again until 3 books later. Genius. No problems, were there? No, sir. Oz was almost destroyed, but I got him out all right before the muggles started swarming around. He fell asleep as we were flying over Bristol. Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall bent forward over the bundle of blankets. Inside, just visible, was a baby boy, fast asleep. Under a tuft of jet black hair over his forehead, they could see a curiously shaped cut, like a bolt of lightning. Is that where? Whispered Professor McGonagall. Yes, said Dumbledore. You'll have that scar forever. Couldn't you do something about it, Dumbledore? Even if I could, I wouldn't. Scars can come in useful. I have one myself above my left knee, which is a perfect map of the London Underground. Well, give him here, Hagrid. We better get this over with. Dumbledore took Harry in his arms and turned towards the Dursleys' house. Could I say goodbye to him, sir? Said Hagrid. He bent his great shaggy head over Harry and gave him what must have been a very scratchy, whiskery kiss. Then suddenly, Hagrid let out a howl like a wounded dog. Shh! Hissed Professor McGonagall. You'll wake the muggles! Sorry, sobbed Hagrid, taking out a large spotted handkerchief and burying his face in it. But I can't stand it. Lily and James dead, and poor little Harry off to live with muggles. Yes, all very sad, but get a grip on yourself, Hagrid, or we'll be found, Professor McGonagall whispered, patting Hagrid gingerly on the arm as Dumbledore stepped over the low garden wall and walked through the front door. He laid Harry gently on the doorstep, took a letter out of his cloak, tucked it inside Harry's blankets, and then came back to the other two. For a full minute, the three of them stood and looked at the low bundle. Hagrid's shoulders shook. Professor McGonagall blinked furiously, and the twinkling light that usually shone from Dumbledore's eyes seemed to have gone out. Well, said Dumbledore finally, that's that. We have no business staying here. We may as well go and join the celebrations. Yeah, said Hagrid in a very muffled voice. I best get this bike away. Good night, Professor McGonagall. Professor Dumbledore, sir. Wiping his streaming eyes on his jacket sleeve, Hagrid swung himself onto the motorbike and kicked the engine into life. With a roar, it rose into the air and off into the night. I shall see you soon, I expect, Professor McGonagall, said Dumbledore, nodding to her. Professor McGonagall blew her nose in reply. Dumbledore turned and walked back down the street. On the corner, he stopped and took out the silver put-outer. He clicked it once, and 12 balls of light sped back to their street lamp so that Privet Drive glowed suddenly orange, and he could make out a tabby cat slinking around the corner at the other end of the street. He could just see the bundle of blankets on the step of number 4. Good luck, Harry, he murmured. He turned on his heel, and with a swish of his cloak, he was gone. A breeze ruffled the neat hedges of Privet Drive, which lay silent and tidy under the inky sky, the very last place you expect anything astonishing to happen. Harry Potter rolled over inside the blankets without waking up. One small hand closed on the letter beside him, and he slept on, not knowing he was special, not knowing he was famous, not knowing he would be woken in a few hours' time by Mrs. Dursley's screams as she opened the front door to put out the milk bottles, nor that he would spend the next few weeks being prodded and pinched by his cousin Dudley. He couldn't know that at this very moment, people mean and secret all over the country were holding up their glasses and saying in hushed voices, "To Harry Potter, the boy who lived." That was chapter 1. That was fantastic. That was good. What'd you guys think? As I said earlier, I will be taking guests in the room. So if any of you want to come on here and discuss with me, feel free. Before I bring in guests, because I have some discussion questions. But let's just recap here. Guys, remember McGonagall was like talking about like, oh my god, like they're dead. And I was like, bro, I'm actually like sad right now. I felt things. Okay. First of all, let's discuss the Dursleys. It's homework time. What are the Dursleys? The Dursleys embody the Muggle world. They are the manifestations of what J.K. Rowling writes the Muggle world to be. And what's that? Boring. The Dursleys are boring. They are hyper stereotypes of just boredom. As he says, what he says, like, I don't, where is it? Oh yeah, he says, Mr. Dursley didn't approve of imagination. I do not approve of imagination. That line always stuck with me. And they're gonna contrast what we're going to see later on, which is the magic world, which is the complete opposite of boring. Literally the complete opposite of boring. Mr. Dursley was petrified by some dude hugging him. Like, to Mr. Dursley, somebody, a stranger, like, hugging you is the most, like, unimaginable thing you can possibly do. He was petrified on the spot. And, like, what a contrast between, like, the wizards and the Dursleys. But, of course, Harry just gets fucked over. I was always like, Dumbledore, what are you doing? Like, the Dursleys are literally, like, evil and that they beat him. Like, they're literally like, abusive. Like, this is no place for a young wizard to grow up. But, of course, what was his reasoning? That Harry was going to grow up a celebrity. And Harry's overall biggest character trait is his humility. Because, you know, as we're going to see, Harry his humility is like next level. I mean, the kid he's like the most popular kid alive, and he has like 2 friends at Hogwarts. Like, he's just like, but like, maybe that is because he's raised by the Dursleys. So maybe Dumbledore was onto something. And I thought it was interesting just how little that we know in this first chapter about like what actually happened that night. Because later on, you know, it's revealed that it was very old ancient magic that saved Harry's life. It was the love of his mother giving her life for her son. Somehow protected him and repelled the curse back on Voldemort. And as we were saying earlier, Dumbledore says he acts like he doesn't know. I mean, he acts like he doesn't know, but like we know that he knows. Because in the Order of the Phoenix at the very end, whenever he sits down, and he's like, okay, Harry, I'm gonna spill the beans with you, and I'm gonna tell you like what's actually like what's up for the first time. And he says that like, you know, this is all spoilers. I'm just gonna assume that you all know the story. But he's like, I remember like the first time that like I dropped you off at the door, and like how I damned you to like live with these Muggles, and I felt terrible about that. And then after your first year of Hogwarts, somehow I allowed you to be put in all this danger and fight Voldemort again, but you succeeded, and I felt even worse. And in the second year, like you fought him again, and blah 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 blah, and I would just refuse to tell you like what's up. And now like you're like a man now, so now I can like really tell you what the fuck's up. I love that chapter. I believe it's called the Prophecy from Order of the Phoenix. But anyway, so yeah, the seeds of many things to come were put in this chapter. Sirius Black got name dropped. It's also a very easy to understand introduction into like the wizarding world. Like just by reading this first chapter, like, oh, I get it. Like, okay, like wizards exist, magic exists, but like us muggles are just too like we're too boring. And like we're so like dulled by like our society that we've created that like we just don't like notice the obvious, which is that like magic exists. It really is like a smart commentary on like society itself. But anyways, I guess I'll get somebody in here. Who wants to join me for a little bit? Can I have a speaker on this? I guess there's no speaker for some reason. So forget about that. I'll just ask the questions. Okay, so to reference earlier, Professor McGonagall says, like, you're the only person that Voldemort ever fears. And Dumbledore responds with, yeah, but he has powers that I could never have. So what does he mean by that? Exactly. Yes, chapter 1 of the movie takes like 2 minutes. Tops. Now what he means by that is that he's alluding to magic having like having, for example, like the light side and the dark side. Like there's magic that is inherently good and like takes a good heart to perform. And there's other magic that like is more like satanic and you know like the forbidden curses. What is it called? The unforgivable curses, the 3 curses in the Goblet of Fire, which is the one where you can control somebody's body. The second one, which is the killing curse, and the third one, which is oh, I think it was just the pain, where like you're just like in excruciating pain. So that's what Dumbledore means. He's alluding to the fact that like yeah, I'm strong as fuck, but like since I'm like a good person, that nerfs me. Yes, you're right. That's what it was called, something like that. Crucio, something like that. Cruciatus, yeah. Right. So he's saying that like since I'm a good person, like Voldemort could probably like I'm not going to stoop to that level to use his magic because I have to be like evil to use the magic. You know what I mean? It really is like the dark side and the light side because you know how Anakin was like, I need to get stronger. The only way I can get stronger is if I use the dark side because the dark side is just like stronger and has access to like a bunch of like crazy shit you can do. Same with magic here. Yeah, okay. And then one more thing I just wanted to talk about, which is relates to the Dursleys. and their representation. Because the whole Harry Potter, the whole thing is like we're like the human race. Like Mr. Dursley goes to work, yells at people, and like that to him is like a good day. Like that's like fun to him. But like to the wizards, but like the wizards are supposed to be like kind of an enlightened society because like they just care about having fun, you know. And like we think that we're all like that, but like the wizards to us like the wizards like just think that we're stupid, which is true. Like muggles are dumb. Like they're like J.K. Rowling writes them to be like dumb, and but that's the joke. That's the joke, you see. So anyway, whenever the line "undursley-ish" was used, I forgot the context exactly, but Mr. Dursley says like it's like the most undursley-ish thing I've ever seen or whatever. So what does undursley-ish reference? Anything that is out of the ordinary in the slightest. Because, so like, I hope none of my family members are watching this. Because I'm going to drop some tea. But like, growing up, like I could so relate with Harry because I felt just like him. Like I was just surrounded by by the Dursleys. Like just people that like, or just don't care about having fun. Like there's no fun. Like it's all serious. You know, it's like boring. It's like boring people. So on Dursley-ish, like J.K. Rowling is telling us like the Dursleys are like literally the definition of like the Muggles. And what are the Muggles? Boring, stupid, you know, the complete opposite of magic. And that's why the books are so fantastic because you always see, it always starts out with like, you know, Harry suffering. And by suffering, he's just living in the Muggle world. He's living our everyday lives and he's suffering because the wizarding world is just like an enlightened society. And so whenever he finally leaves the Dursleys, and it's just like, oh, like such a like fucking finally, I'm away from the human world, and it's like we're there with him, like we get to leave our human world too with him, and it's just like it's just such a fun ride to go on. It really is fantastic. But yeah, if there's no other questions or any comments y'all want to make, I think we had a good first chapter. And Dumbledore's put-outer thing that he used to click out all the lamps, that comes back in the Deathly Hallows. Ron is given to that in Dumbledore's spoilers, but Dumbledore's will. He gave Ron the put-outer. We don't talk about Fantastic Beasts. I have the book. I own the book. You know, they're all like cute and cheeky. So like they released like a Fantastic Beasts because like I was always like, why? I never understood like whose idea was this? Because Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them is mentioned once, count it once in the entire franchise, and it's in this book. It's in the first one. It's like freshman year reading for all wizards. My thoughts on the new movie dropping. I wish I could say I was excited for it. On paper, like I would be like going crazy with the excitement. But you know, Harry Potter movie adaptations, I'm not really all there for them, to be honest. I hate Newt Scamander. He is a terrible protagonist. I mean, he's just non-existent. Like he's just there. And I'm like, why are you the protagonist here? Like, show me literally anybody else. Dumbledore come back school, but he was back in the last movie, and it's like I can't remember a single scene with him. And also, it fucks up the timelines too, because like I'm not like IQ 500 when it comes to Harry Potter lore, but like pretty sure that Professor McGonagall was in that movie, and it's like, wait a second. Pretty sure that she said in like the second book that she's only been there for like 30 years. And like that movie takes place in like 1920. So it's like, like I guess she's like 100 something years old. I don't know. So I can get away with it with Dumbledore, but it's like, are all wizards immortal? I don't think so. And most of all, just the writing is bad. The writing is just not very good. Oh yeah, and the last movie, like Dumbledore. Oh my god, no, the movie's so stupid. But the guy that plays the Flash was like Dumbledore's long lost like cousin or something stupid. And then like they try to make like, okay, so like in the like Harry like learns about Grindelwald and about oh, my connection might be bad, but he talked about Grindelwald and how like they were best friends, but like Dumbledore had to fight him in like he fought him in like the most like legendary duel like ever fought. Like he fought Grindelwald or whatever. Like they made a big deal how like this like was the most like famous duel, blah 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 blah. Like this is the shit, whatever. And then like the movie comes around and it's like they just made him gay. They just made them gay. And it's like why, you know? Why can't they just like be friends and then like have to be torn apart because of ideologies and then fight? Like why? Oh yeah, I know why, because J.K. Rowling retconned Dumbledore's sexuality. But I'm like, oh god, it triggers me so bad. I remember exactly where I was. Remember that she tweeted that out. She's like, yeah, Dumbledore is gay, deal with it. And I was like, who the fuck ever asked about Dumbledore's sexuality? This old fucking man? I don't want to know if he's fucking men or women. I don't give a fuck. I don't want to think about Dumbledore having sex. That's like disgusting. Like, why would you even be thinking about Dumbledore having sex? You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? And then she's like, oh, Hermione's black. And then I'm like, then it's like I point to the sentence from the Philosopher's Stone, where it's like her pale skin shone in the moonlight. So it's like, you wrote that though. It's like you wrote that, and you're saying that is triggers me. It triggers me. It triggers me, but like my girl JK, I'll always be a JK Rowling stan. Stan's kind of too far, but I'll always respect her. No matter how many people they make gay or she makes gay for no reason, no matter how many race swaps she does. I also heard a rumor that The Cursed Child, which was a stage play, is basically Harry Potter 8, but it was a play. It was only a play in England, but like J.K. Rowling literally wrote the script. Like it's like literally like the continuation, what happens after. And I read the screenplay, but I hear they might be adapting it for film. That's the rumor that I've heard. And now I'd be really interested in watching that. Fuck, I'd be hella down. I'd be hype as fuck for that movie. But like Fantastic Beasts 2 or the fuck it. Oh, it's gonna be Fantastic Beasts 3. Oh my god, those movies are so bad. How do you fuck up Harry Potter that bad? I can't even remember how many movies there are. And also, Johnny Depp played Grindelwald, and Johnny Depp got canceled, and so they replaced him with a different guy, and they're not gonna like. They're just gonna pretend that it's Johnny Depp. Like, how insulting. So I get shit happen. No. Why would you fire? Well, first of all, you would firing Johnny Depp would made no sense. And second of all, it just makes no sense narratively because like idiots are gonna be like, who's that? You know, like the modern audiences who are just like literally like stupid. Like they're saying that I always love like take the dumbest person you know. Half the world is like, or most of the world is dumber than that guy. Like that's facts. Like most movie going audiences are like literally stupid. So they're gonna be like, who's that guy? Blah, blah, who's that? What's going on? It's too confusing. Like I know it, dude. I know people are not gonna know what the fuck's going on. Because the last one was confusing too. Because they try because JK's like, oh, let me pick and choose all these little pieces of like Harry Potter lore to stuff in these stupid movies to try and get asses in seats. It's like, oh guys, look, it's Dumbledore. He's young. Oh my god, holy fucking shit, dude. And it's like, okay, well then how come we didn't hear about any of this shit in like the 7 books? Huh? And you're actively destroying the canon. Right. It's not like Grindelwald is not Batman. You can't just recast him every time, JK. Okay, but anyways, I've ranted long enough, I think. That's all I had to say about chapter 1. But it was a good read. It was a good read. Good use for our time. A very intellectual discussion. And I guess I could let you all go. So thanks for coming by, guys. And I will see you in the future.